Hi, this is Richard Edelman, and you're listening to the TrustMakers.
Hi, everybody. I'm Smita, Reddy, and I'm a global partner for our global clients here at Edelman. Today, I'm joined by Colin and Samir. We're recording live from the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity. In this series, we're meeting with experts across brands, marketers, influencers. So we're really excited to have Colin and Samir on the show. Colin Rosenblum and Samir Chaudry, co-host of Colin and Samir, a YouTube show and podcast that breaks down the latest in the creator economy from the perspective of creators. With over 1.4 million subscribers, their show covers a vast array of industry events and interviews. And you've interviewed some big names on YouTube, from Mr. Beast, Emma Chamberlain, Mark Rober, and you've worked across a ton of different brands like Spotter, Google, Canon, Samsung. So Colin and Samir, welcome to TrustMakers.
Thank you for having us. This is beautiful.
It's amazing. Tell me, I heard this is your first Cannes experience. Yeah. How's it going so far?
It weirdly doesn't feel like our first. It feels like the whole ad industry and creator economy from the US is ported over here to the south of France, which is great. So we're familiar with all the people here, all the platforms. There's a lot of fellow creators here. Feels like there's a bigger emphasis on the creator economy, which is great and really fun, but it's tough to complain. We're out in the south of France and talking about the thing that we love to talk about.
It's somewhat surreal that it feels comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, that when we touched down, we immediately started running into people that we know very well on the street. And that's so interesting. And like I'm so grateful for that actually in our career that we could do something like this.
Yeah, Cannes is like one of those places where it can make a big world feel really small and intimate, which is amazing. So let's take a little bit of a step back for some of our listeners at TrustMakers who might not be familiar with you two. Tell us a little bit about Colin and Samir, how you guys got your start, and give listeners a little bit of background on yourselves.
Yeah, I'll give you the 13-year history in as short of time as possible. When I graduated college, I went to film school. I really wanted to be in the world of film. I ended up working in Hollywood as an editor for maybe 2 months. I really wanted to be in Hollywood. I thought maybe this was my path to doing all types of things. I wanted to be on camera. I wanted to be a producer. I was an assistant editor, and the lead editor there gave me some of the best advice I've ever gotten. He said to me, "You seem a little frustrated here. What exactly do you want to do?" And I said to him, I felt like I could come up with an idea, I could film it, I could edit it, and I could put it out myself. Like I felt like this process was really long and monotonous. And he said, well, you should just leave and do exactly that. Because success in the creative industry is just the opportunity to get more of what you're doing right now. And he said, do exactly what you want to do and you'll get the opportunity to do more of that. And so I left and I turned to the only place where I couldn't get a no, which was YouTube. And started making YouTube videos in 2010 about the sport of lacrosse, which was the community I was a part of. I grew up playing lacrosse and thought of it in the direction of modernizing like a sports network online. What does the modern sports network look like? Met Colin through that process. He was making a docu-series about the Colorado Club lacrosse team, and we distributed that on our YouTube channel. Long story short, we sold that company in 2014, went from one channel to 60 channels about lacrosse all on YouTube, and then worked in-house at a bigger sports media group, left that company and started Colin and Samir with the goal of creating a platform that was the platform that we wish we had when we first started on YouTube, teaching other creators about the career, sitting down with top creators to understand their journey of how they made it on YouTube, and getting into the insides of what it means to run a creator business.
You know, it's so interesting. Like, what I would always say is, like, this is sort of the most meta type interview that we could be doing, right? We're here at Cannes talking about the rise of advertising, including creators and YouTubers and influencers. You guys interview those guys, and now I'm interviewing you, right? And so, because I think, you know, one of the big things is like, this has really taken the industry by storm. We were talking about this before around the YouTube world and the creator world. 5-10 years ago might not have been taken so seriously. And here we are today, and there's a lot of data and research that shows just how powerful influencers can be, right? When you think about that evolution, right, 10 years in the business, what surprised you about this evolution, and where do you kind of see it going to next?
I think what surprised me is that, from where we started in a very niche community. There weren't that many people interested in lacrosse. They were very passionate. It was an underserved community, and it was not going to be shown on ESPN. And so we were able to grow a passionate, smaller community there. I think what has surprised me is that it has become completely mainstream. Like, it has surpassed all of these niches. What has started in serving underserved audiences who feel like they're not being spoken to has translated into like the replacement of television, right? Like, it has gone so far, and I'm amazed at where it's landed today.
I think I'm surprised that in 2024, we are still having the conversation of validating that online creators are mainstream or are driving purchase intent or driving advertiser consideration. Because that was a conversation we were having in 2011. And in my head, I was like, oh, the ad industry will catch up in the next few years. But I feel like to this day, most people have caught up, but we still sit in rooms sometimes and justify that YouTube and social platforms are the place to advertise. And I think that surprises me a bit, but I think it's been really cool to see the maturity of the space.
Yeah, and I think, you guys had talked about this idea of like, you boldly claim around like almost replacing TV, right? But when we think about TV, 10 years ago, we all had this shared viewing experience, right? And now we're seeing just audiences getting so fragmented, but they're large, right? Like, you have 1.4 million followers, right? Like, when you think about your audience and catering to your audience, what are some principles that you align to? How do you guys think about the Colin and Samir audience and how to nurture and foster and grow and develop that group?
It's something we think about a lot, and it's something that we visualize as a pyramid, right? And at the base of the pyramid, you have aspiring creators. Those are the large bulk of our audience who are coming to us. People who may not be making a full-time career as a creator. They may be using a camera, telling stories, but it's not yet taken off fully. Then we have career creators above that, so professionals like ourselves. And then we have, at the very top, people from the creator industry, right, who are working with creators.
Yeah, and just like any other brand, we have a mission statement, right? Our mission is to educate and empower the next generation of creators. We have value propositions to each of those audience segments if we understand why they're watching our show. And just like any other brand, we think about that. But I would say some of the things that have been really interesting recently is we think about this concept of depth and width. So right now on the internet, there's a lot of ways to attract viewership. Views are very available. You can study the algorithm. There's more information out there of how do I generate viewership? And I think views are very appealing as a quantifiable metric of success. But at scale, I think right now, what we care about the most is depth with our audience. We think about the difference between width and depth. We can make something, we have made piece of content that can get 40, 60 million views, right? And typically that's short form content. And that's exciting, but it's not as meaningful to us as 100,000 people watching 40 minutes of a podcast, right? Or listening to us for 2 hours every Monday. And so, on a month-to-month basis, we oscillate between like 7 and 10 million views on the channel. And our average view duration is in the 40 to 50 minute range. So that's really meaningful to us. That like long form, in-depth conversations where people are willing to sit with us. And another thing is that 28% of our viewership comes from connected TVs. And on connected TVs, our average viewership is 42 minutes. And so that means people are turning us on in their living room and sitting with us for 40 minutes. That is very significant. Those are the metrics we track: average view duration, engagement, and on YouTube specifically, it's click-through rate and average view duration. Did we make something that people want to click on? Are they interested in the subject matter? That's your first hurdle on YouTube. The second is, did we deliver on that? Like if you were interested in the thumbnail, did we deliver? And the way we can tell if we delivered is your average view duration. How long did you watch?
We like to think about it in terms of, are we delivering memorable views or forgettable views? Right? There are so many opportunities now to watch 1 million short form videos in a day and not remember a single one the next day, not share it with a friend. And we like to think, at least put our videos and our episodes through that filter of, is this a memorable experience? Can you sit with us for 20 to 40 minutes, remember it, really learn something, and remember it the next day, come back, talk about it with a friend?
Yeah, you guys are sort of debunking the whole fast twitch content creation spiral, right? That's happening right now. Like, you guys are getting audiences engaged for long periods of time, right? That's really unheard of. It sort of goes against common notion that like everyone on Gen Z is just sort of only into 7-second ads. There's a real depth to it. So I want to transition and talk a little bit about some of the creators that you guys interviewed, because you've interviewed massive names like Mr. Beast and Mark Rober and Emma Chamberlain. And with all of those guys, right, they have that ability to really gain that depth with their audience. And what are some observations that you could take away just from one of those conversations around how they're building their audiences and how they continue to build their audience?
We think about creators in a few different buckets. One is a relationship-based creator, which is like Emma.
Yeah.
You will watch Emma Chamberlain do anything because what you're watching for is the relationship you have with her. The other side of the coin is idea-based creators. You watch them based on the idea, right? So Mr. Beast, when he first emerged, that was a lot of ideas that had never been seen before. They seemed ridiculous. And over time, that grew to now us recognizing him as having some of the most unique ideas on the platform. And so I think we look at, those as like different buckets. Like Mark, Jimmy, and Emma are all different types of creator. Mark is very like education forward. He's going to explain and articulate concepts to you that feel really good. But the commonality amongst every creator is that they honestly love making videos. And I think might sound like ridiculous, but we had a conversation with Marquez Brownlee, one of the biggest tech creators, arguably the biggest tech creator on the internet. And he related it to a basketball player. And he said, the ones who really make it are the ones who enjoy shooting hoops in the park, right? So if they enjoy, after practice, shooting hoops, getting 1% better year over year, they have a very long career. And I think the people who are the most successful today have been making YouTube videos for over 10 years. And they love it. And even if it maybe didn't work as commercially well as it's presently working, they'd probably still make videos.
It's so interesting. Like, I was thinking about your episode with Mark Rober, who's as like a parent, one of my favorite.
Oh, he's the best.
Creators.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's the best.
He's made his mission statement around making education fun. And, like, my kids love Crunch Labs. And I'm going to switch into our conversation around brands, right? Because I think that's why we're all here in Cannes, right? And Mark is so good. And there was something that you guys said in your last interview with him that I thought was great. It was the preamble for it, which you both said, Mark is so good. He's talking about advertising, and it doesn't feel like an ad. And that really stuck with me, right? Because when we think about authentic brand partnerships, and Gen Z is so savvy, right, when it comes to authentic brand partnerships, where do you guys see that line of like really great authentic brand partnerships, and where does it feel, hate to use like a millennial word, like cringe, right? Like where it just doesn't feel like it's the right partnership? Like, how do you guys approach that? How do you advise others to approach it in that way?
I'll speak at least for ourselves in terms of our brand partners. The most important thing is that we share very similar value props, that there's value prop alignment. Because if we're going to take 90 seconds out of what we were regularly doing, right, in a video for one of our integrations, we're going to kind of stop the story. It should still deliver value to our audience, right? I think that's like the most important thing for us, is that filter of like, hopefully you will stay tuned, because not only we're telling the story in an engaging way during this 90 seconds, but we're partnering with a company that like can further what you're trying to get out, right? Like if we're trying to educate and empower creators, we're going to work with people that do the same thing, right? That can help you do that.
Yeah, we're very mission statement forward like that. And, our biggest sponsor is Spotter, and they have the same mission. So when we first met, what we think about is that if we're going to do an ad, how does it not feel like an ad?
Yep.
And if we have the same mission statement, it's not going to feel like an ad to the audience, right? Because they are there for education about how to further their career on our show. So if we bring you a brand that has offers that will further your career as a creator, it's not forced in any way, shape, or form. It is what you are there for.
I think the Mark Rober video actually is a really great example, because in that video, we're telling you about how he's built a business based off subscriptions. The ad integration is with Shopify, and it's a subscription product that they are now offering. It's like, hey, if you You are here to learn from what we learned from Mark Rober. What you learned is how to build a business on subscriptions. Here's a product that'll help you do that.
I think the tangible advice we give to creators is actually to keep their overhead really low so that they can say no. Because I think what happens is a lot of creators, the ad market is inherently volatile, but as a young creator who emerged during the pandemic, during 2020, maybe on TikTok or on YouTube and found success, experienced one of the most abundant ad markets in the creator economy ever. And potentially received, an influx of cash and said, okay, cool, I'm going to hire some employees, I'm going to rent a studio, and I'm going to keep making these videos. And then you get to a point in 2024 where maybe the ad market starts to get a little bit more diluted. They're spending across more creators. Maybe your formats aren't working as well, but you still have these employees and you still have the studio. Now you have to say yes. Now you aren't in a position to say no. And now you're doing ads that don't align with your value proposition, but you have no choice. And so our advice to creators is to recognize that and keep your overhead low. The best content is created when your budget is $0. When you just take a step back and go, what can I do just with my phone? And when you hire a team and build a studio, the question you have to ask yourself is, can you do this without all that? Can you continue this format without that? Are you flexible? Are you nimble? And there's a difference between, like, right now in the creator economy, there's some people building massive media companies, right? Mr. Beast, 300 employees, something like that, right? Then you have Ryan Trahan, who is doing almost 20 million views a video with himself and 2 team members. And he doesn't have an office. He's just shooting a lot of the stuff on his iPhone. And so it oscillates between how big these companies are, but good storytelling wins. And as long as you're focused on that and you keep your overhead low, you can withstand some of the volatility. And I think that's what's really important, is putting yourself in a position to say no. Sometimes that means a subscription, like a membership, right? Patreon, diversifying your revenue to the point where you can say no. We say no a lot. And sometimes it's hard because you're running a business. But what's good for us is we have a team around us that can hold us to standards and make sure that we keep our integrity as a brand, that if this is going to feel forced in any way, shape, or form, we can't do it. Because that is our core product.
Yeah, it's like that authenticity to your audience. And, I love that advice for creators, because it also goes back to what you said earlier about, like, the people who love the game, right?
Yeah,
That's
totally.
the love of the game. So let me flip that.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to brands looking to partner with creators?
I would say the biggest mistake that we see often are brands who don't watch our videos specifically, who come to us. And I think that's their end of the bargain, actually, is to make sure that this is a good fit and there is an alignment, right? That, like, if we are going to take the time to talk about it, we're going to partner and work together, that it's additive to the experience of the viewer and not a departure.
Yeah.
Historically, I think people looked at creators as talent, more similar to like an actor or a traditional talent, where I think we are a mix of, yes, we are talent, we can get on camera, but we're also producers, we're a production company, and we're also in the distribution business. Our job is to drive viewership with our content. So we understand all of those things. I think if a brand can come to us and honestly understand that we know those 3 elements, give us the problem you're trying to solve. Who are you trying to reach? What is the call to action? What does success mean for you in this campaign? And then let us craft that. Because I think sometimes we just aren't looked at as like someone like a creative agency, where they'll turn to a creative agency and say, can you make me an asset? You know best with that. Then let me turn to the creator and say, can you amplify it? And just look at us as maybe amplification or distribution of a certain message, but we can really help you craft it. We are storytellers, and we also know our audience better than anyone, and we know the platforms really well. And so I think brands have to, like, really trust in us. Now, that said, how do you find us, right? How do you find the right creators to work with?
Yeah.
I think that's a big piece of it, especially today. There's tons of creators. You mentioned, like, we're in a fragmented media environment. So if you're looking for relevant audience, I think you have to find someone you can trust, and curation of creators is really important. We mentioned Spotter earlier. They have the top 0.02% of creators on YouTube. So I would go turn to someone like them who has, like, a premium grouping of creators that you can work with, whether you're trying to run media across that or work directly with a creator. I think you need to know the right people to work with who are going to treat your brand with that level of professionalism that I just mentioned.
I would say, too, you want to forge human relationships.
Yeah.
The majority
Yeah,
of our
which is why
longest
you guys are-
partnerships
Right.
have been
Yeah.
built off incredibly human relationships. And even from the creator side, often creators will ask us, how do you vet a brand? And we'll say, oh, the best thing you can do is generate a human relationship with someone at the brand because they don't want to let you down and you don't want to let them down. And that's like kind of the best we can do, right? Is if we want to ensure a long-term partnership, is like really know someone there.
It is a challenge. I heard a great quote yesterday on a panel that trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets. And I think that your audience is looking at the brands that you are working with as a form of, can they trust you? Yeah. And we think about it as like introducing a friend to your friend group. Like, would you bring this person and introduce them to your group chat with your best friends? And we think about that in the context of like introducing a brand to our audience.
I love that. You brought up trust. I actually hadn't heard that. How do you vet a brand? Because we talk about vetting influencers, vetting creators, right? And I think there's something that I liked that you said earlier, which is really about at the end of the day, if the mission statements align.
Yeah.
Right? And so for creators, thinking about who they are, what would their mission statement be is probably an exercise that I would imagine you guys would get advice you'd give to people. But we're in a really crazy political time right now. Our brand trust survey that's coming out at Cannes is talking about this idea of what people are expecting for brands to do in this political environment, standing up for social issues, when to not speak out. How do you advise creators in this space right now? Because it's tricky. It's like there are new rules, right? How do you see people managing that element of really wanting to bring to life their personal issues and their political issues, and what might get in the way of that?
I find it to be an incredibly personal thing that every creator has to sort of decide for themselves. I think it's important if you do look at yourself as a creator, as a brand, and you have a value prop, a mission statement, to think about, does speaking out politically fit into that? Or can you do it maybe on a separate personal account, right? Or is it part of the brand? Like, I think these are just decisions you have to make and stand by. I think when you do speak up and get involved in politics, I think there's an expectation you'll remain involved, right? So that's something you have to think about as well. It's like, if you start engaging, you're in it.
Yeah,
that's
I
a good
agree
point.
with that.
Yeah.
I think, the reality is that everything that's happening today is not net new, right? There's some new considerations, but media has always been the place we've turned to understand like ideology, right? Ideology is driven from media and storytelling. And so I think today, with the amount of parasocial relationship we have, not only to individuals, but to brands, our expectation is that is also our source of understanding culture and understanding ideology. And so when something becomes incredibly culturally relevant, like something in politics, our expectation is that is the conversation when we open up Instagram or open up Twitter. And I think the absence of it does become very apparent. But to be honest, it's still something that I think a lot of creators are navigating, especially right now. I empathize with the brands who are trying to solve this, of how do they engage. But I think it's just the reality of the matter that media is the place where people look for culture, and political events are some of the only monocultural moments that exist today.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's not that much monoculture anymore. We live in a very fragmented world. And so when something happens that feels like monoculture, I think the expectation is that everyone that you know is engaging in that monoculture.
Yeah. So we're at Cannes and thinking about the future, right, of creator. If we're sitting here at Cannes 5 years from now, what kind of conversations do you think we'll be having about creator?
Again, going back to memorable views versus forgettable views, we've done a few events where sometimes 50 people come, sometimes 250. But that session, that 2 hours that we have with these 50 people, that is essentially for us like a view. It's a brand view, but it is a view that will be remembered perhaps for the next 5 to 10 years, right? Like, if we do our job on that day, they will remember our brand forever. And I think for me, those are the brands that I'm becoming attached to, right? And that I'm bringing with me for a long period of time. The ones that like, I'm not just catching little glimpses of on a short form feed here and there. I'm engaging in a way that's like, oh, I will remember you. I'm a part of this community. And so I think creators and brands will continue to create those types of events together. I think their importance will continue to rise.
I potentially a hot take, controversial take here, but I think the term creator might be gone.
Ooh, I love hot takes.
Yeah. And I think that's because in 5 years, right now we use the term, I think, to describe the independent media publisher who's is led by an individual, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's how we describe it. But, I often think about the concept of like someone like a Hailey Bieber. The majority of how we engage with her is through her Instagram. Kylie Jenner as well, right? And maybe through her show. Are they creators or are they celebrities, right? And now we look at someone like a Mr. Beast who's producing one of the biggest streaming or the biggest game show ever for a streaming platform in Amazon. So is Mr. Beast in 5 years still a creator if he's making the biggest game show on streaming platforms, if he's the most watched person on the internet? We are all watching internet video. And it's largely becoming either subscription-based internet video or advertising-based internet video, right? In 5 years, I think we all might be just generally in the same business.
Yeah.
I think when we land at the Paris airport, we might see, yes, we see Timothée Chalamet right now, but we might see Ryan Trahan there, right, on a billboard. I think cultural relevance is what we're all tracking. And I think the line between a creator and a celebrity is just going to get so incredibly blurred by just the world of cultural relevance.
Yeah, and I think what's so cool, though, even if you were to even think about the term creator, I think it still could stick, though. Like that inherent, like just formation of the word, right? Because these people have built their own models.
It has a great brand to it.
Yeah.
Creator has a great brand. I'm very proud to be called a creator.
It's lasted longer than I thought. I mean, I shared that take as well a couple of years ago that I was like, I just think this word creator is too broad. And we make an effort in our newsletter, actually, and on our channel to talk about creators as they would have been referred to before internet video, of like, oh, that's just a comedian. That's a journalist.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a filmmaker.
That's a filmmaker.
Yeah. Everyone we know has emerged from the internet.
Wow. Thank you, Colin and Samir, for joining us today. I learned a lot.
Great.
Will creators still exist? Will it not? I don't know. Let's find out 5 years from now. But yeah, thank you so much. Great discussion, and hope you guys both have an amazing can.
You too.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for tuning into the TrustMakers, an Edelman podcast in partnership with Advertising Week, where we speak with leaders and other trust builders across institutions. See you next time.